Welcome to the iron casting workshop demo. My name's Lauren and
Josh.
Ari. We all went to Mass Art and graduated in the same general time frame. We started the Iron Guild together, which is an iron casting performance group. Josh and I have gone on to start a small bronze casting business in Elliott, Maine, which is just over the border.
And Lori teaches welding and fabrication.
And I teach welding fabrication. So we're metal people. Today I'm going to start by going over the sand molds that we're going to be making. And then Lori's going to go over the furnace, and Josh is going to go over safety. And at 2 o'clock later on this afternoon, if you want to come back, you can start making your own objects. And then it will go tomorrow morning, we'll do the actual casting. So all objects will be made, all molds will be made tonight, and casting will happen in the morning. Okay, so there's a few different ways of, a few different sizes for these molds. One is this size, which is the most typical. The casting itself is basically this square block in here. This is where this is what your casting will be, this general shape. In this one, you can see that it's larger, but the shape itself is actually this size. Get into these molds, harden the sand, and then take the mold out. The sand that we use is a mixture of clay sand, actually, from Home Depot, and it's the stuff called sodium silicate, which is also called water glass, which is used in mold making, it's used in egg preserving, it's used in sealing wood floors. It's a very typical material.
So we're mixing the dry sand right from Home Depot with the binder, the water glass.
Yeah, so it's right now it's currently still what we call wet, even though it's not really wet. It's still soft with the water glass. As it sets with air. So if the lids were off of these containers, they'd start setting. They'd get a crust on the top surface. So that's why we have them in buckets with lids and some bags. So as soon as we start setting, we want to kind of keep going. We don't want to let it sit in between packings. So there's two options. There's either packing the sand directly into the mold the way it is and getting a blank slate that you can then carve into. So you can carve in a design, you can carve in whatever your imagination can make up. Or you can place shallow objects on this small box. That's what I did with this piece here, which is just some string that I placed inside this mold. I brought a bunch of things that you could potentially use, different kinds of strings, some aluminum armature wire, some leaves, pretty much anything that's shallow enough to leave enough space to leave, when you put a board or something across it, you want to at least have ½ an inch of sand space left so that the mold doesn't collapse or break when you pour the iron into it. There's a lot of stress going on when you're pouring a ladle of 5 pounds of metal into it. So we don't want to have a weak mold, so you just want to make sure that your object isn't too far away from the, or is far away enough. So something like this, I'll just do this little guy right here. Another thing to keep in mind is that you don't want your object to go so far off this board, this little inner square. If you imagine, and I'll show you why, I'll do it the way that you're not supposed to do it. To have this go all the way over to touch this edge would mean that the mold would have a hole in it out the side, which means your metal would flow out the side. So it's important to just kind of keep your, actually I won't make it bad, I'll make it good, and then we'll just show you.
Take your word for it.
So the object...
Yeah, it came out a little bit, but not too far, but yeah, exactly. That's
The object you place ends up being a negative in the cast, but then you fill it in with metal.
Exactly.
And then it will come out, the finished product would be a relief of that object.
It will look like what you have, exactly. So your mold will look like exactly the inverse of what you have. Then you fill it and you'll get that back. So it'll actually look like whatever you put down on this is what you're going to get in the metal. Not exactly, but pretty close. For finer objects like this, we have a fine sand that we just put as a surface texture on there first, or surface layer. So this is a Riddler screen. It's just a screen. We use this to make sure that the fine sand doesn't have little pieces of hardened sand in it, and to get a nice fine texture on the surface. So this is a bag of fine sand, which on the way up, the lid came off in the trailer. So hopefully it's okay. It feels okay.
Is that still the clay sand, or is that?
This is actually a finer sand.
You have to buy this from the sand people.
You know the Sandman.
We know what you're saying. Yeah. I think it's 200 grit.
Yeah, it's like New York State riverbed sand or something.
So this is just trying to smush it in. You can do a check and see we're pretty much there. We don't need a lot.
When you say 200 grit, what's what for cubic?
Well, it's like analogous to sandpaper. So like when you think about sand,
The thickness
yeah, when you
of the
think about
granule,
sandpaper, yeah,
the
like,
granule size, right?
I think it's the granule size. Yeah.
so
I don't know.
36 grit is really, yeah, it has to do with
400 for finish.
yeah, the grain size. Or like they'll say it's like a certain mesh size, so it falls to a certain mesh.
200 is good for getting fine detail. That's really good.
We only have a little bit of it because all you have to do is cover the pad.
Right.
You don't really have to like fill it up. You're just taking the detail work and then the rest is just back up.
So I'm just using very light fingers and packing it very gently so that it doesn't budge off of this high point. You don't want to pack it too tightly because you want the next layer to bind to that layer as well. If you pack it really tightly, then it won't be any grab between the two layers.
So that's
So-
on top of the leaf you put in there, right?
Yeah, put it on top of the leaf, correct. Yep.
How much water glass do you use per pound of sand, or 5 pounds?
50 pounds of sand is 1 pint of water glass. So with a 50-pound bag, we do a pint. Sorry, oh, okay. This is the quartz sample home filter. As you can see, it doesn't look as fine because it's not. So then you just want to try to not have clumps. So usually I just sort of run it through my fingers while I'm putting it in. There's not a lot of clumps. You don't typically find clumps, but you just make sure that the sand isn't too. Actually, I just felt the clumps, so it's good to do this in case there are. So just like lightly packing while I'm, because I don't want to move my pattern around, my leaf around. So I've got to be gentle at first.
You got a rammer?
Yep. And then for, once you get majority of your sand in here, you can start ramming it, which is using, well, we use wooden tools. A lot of people use wooden tools. There's also metal tools that you can use, but these guys, it's basically just a wooden block. I'm gonna do that in a second. So you want to hit it pretty hard. You want to squish the sand down onto your pattern pretty well. If you don't, your sand is going to be crumbly and it's going to fall apart.
You need all the glue that's covering those grains to get stuck together.
So it's important to put some pressure into this, but you don't need to be like slamming it because you're just going to move the sand out of the way. You're just going to be pushing the sand. So you just want to, and especially focus on your edges. Your edges are what's going to keep the mold strong. Now this is the same sort of technique that you would use for traditional sand cast. I mean, this is sort of the method that we've developed, or not developed, but that has been developed to do sort of easier casting as far as making sand molds in industry, or maybe at Mass Art, if you remember, 2-part sand molds. You would have actually a flask, which is made out of wood or metal, and it's basically a box that you would put your object into, pack sand around it just like this, then pack sand in both sides of the box, take half of the box apart and remove your object and cast into the cavity where your object was. Then you want to make sure that this is flat, because it's going to be sitting, this is actually going to be sitting on the floor, so if it's unlevel, then you're going to have a wonky guy. Any sand that that you can save, please try, because one of the limits for the workshop is how much sand we have. We brought a lot, but that'll just help determine how many people can actually do the workshop. And next is the gassing.
So the other materials already mixed into that?
Yes, we pre-mixed the sodium silicate into the material.
Both of the sand?
Well, all is in it.
You can cast into like wood and driftwood and stuff if anyone wants to be adventurous and find something cool.
So it's not looking like a crystal thing in it that
The sodium silicate is liquid. I'll turn down.
Yeah, just screw that
Yeah, there you go. That's good. Up, out.
Sorry. The handle, not a screw.
out. Well, it's designed for
That's
pushing
fine.
beer, it's not
That's
really
good.
designed
That's
for foundry. You notice the,
Highly refined foundry technology.
This was bought new, okay? Totally not
Now, what are you doing?
So I'm pumping CO2 through the sand, which is setting the sand hard. The sand will set with oxygen just in a normal environment, but it will take a few days to really set up hard. The CO2 is like glue, and if you imagine like Elmer's glue gets hard after you let it sit with air. It's kind of like that. Turn up a little more.
sure.
Okay, fine. That's good. All right, you're right. And it'll also set with, so it'll set with air, and it sets faster with hot air, which we just learned, so we might try to figure out ways to use hot air instead of the CO2, because it's kind of a pain.
And it costs money.
Then it costs money, and hot air.
Hot air is free.
Yeah, because we have
Cheap.
furnaces and things. Things are hot in the foundry. So what we typically say is to hold the plunger in each position for about 10 seconds.
And you can shove it.
Josh likes to do this.
In my mind, I can imagine CO2 shove.
Infusion.
I don't know. Mine still work, and I don't do it that way, but it's fun. Get in there. When we have a really thick mold, which occasionally we'll do a deeper mold, we actually make pricks into the sand to allow the gas to go down deeper. For this, it goes down to the bottom of these molds just fine. The gas penetrates.
And sometimes it doesn't, so if it's flipped over and the sand is really soft at the top, then we can gas it a little bit more at the top as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. That should be pleasant.
Walk now.
All right. So now, would you maybe hold it to come out? Usually this will be full, so we'll just flip them all at the same time.
There you go.
You want this stick?
Okay, so now, before we do anything, we'll make sure that it's hard, which it is. Feels nice and hard, which is great.
Yeah, sweet.
Thanks. So we got these special,
did it.
we done did it. These are the carving tools that we'll be using. There's all sorts in here. One of the better tools, though, which seems silly, is a nail, though. It really carves very well. When you have objects that are embedded in there that are delicate, it's good to try to use small dental tools, which we'll be hiding because we don't want you to scratch into the sand with them because they'll just break. But when you have a delicate thing, just ask us for the dental tools and we'll give them to you. So now is when you sort of want to follow the, you can see that is buried a little bit there. But so we've got a little bit showing, which is great because that gives us somewhere to go by to start. We have to take it out. Yeah. So somewhere to start to clear away the sand. If we just pull it out, it'll probably be fine, but we'll get a lot more tearing, like you can see here. If we actually dig the sand away where the object is, we'll get less tearing of the sand and we'll have a crisper image. So quickly, and this is also, you know, like you could also use this method and the carving method. So you could do a little bit of leaf in there and then go in and use some design, whatever, do whatever you want. That's the part you guys come up with. I don't have to worry about that. So I'll just do this real quick. I want to be delicate, try to get the sucker out. And I didn't, another option is to put a release on the object, which I didn't do.
Piece of tape or something?
The little thing that says powder sock.
Powder sock has,
Oh.
if you left it in here,
Yeah.
you would just
Yeah.
get carbon, you'd get residue left over from the object, which you'd rather not have. So doing it this way, and this is
Like
coming out
the leaf was like
beautifully.
sappy or something like that.
You guys are gonna be jealous.